Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you are attending this stream, I want to thank you. Tonight we're doing something a little bit different with Limitless, and we're spotlighting someone that is an inspiration around the world. Um, so I want to thank our friends, um, our supporters, for everyone for tuning in. But this is an opportunity to show everyone else other people who have had to overcome trials and tribulations and rise above adversity. And perhaps adversity is an advantage, but how do we become triumphant and how do we heal? Well, that's what we're going to cover tonight. And it's an honor for me to share my friend, mentor. He's also a pastor, a 3-time author. He goes by the name of the Face of Forgiveness by his own example. And that name came from the people. So it's an honor. I'm going to bring him on board now. And he's going to share with you and us some of his testimony. And may it be echoed for generations to come. But it's no secret, ladies and gentlemen, if you want a better world, build it. Doctor, you with us?
Yes, I am, Justin. And let me say good evening and thank you so much for allowing me to be on your stream tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, the honor is shared. And I gave people a little bit of an update about you. Nonetheless, I would still like to cover some things about you. You know, you face some adversities, and I'm going to let you tell the story. But through the adversities that you faced, rather than it breaking you, you let it create and make you someone greater than you ever would have imagined. And perhaps even at the loss of sight, you gain true sight and faith and understanding of what it is to be forgiving and how to unconditionally love other people. Just want to thank you for that and being an inspiration, not only to me, but people around the world.
Well, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to tell my story and to share with others what I believe is a mandate from God on how to make ourselves a better individual. Uh, I try to work from the premise that the attitude of forgiveness is it's not just something that we should do or could do, but I believe it's more of a mandate from God. Um, Let me start with where this all began in 2001 um, on a July night, a hot July night, traveling on the highway from Peoria, Illinois to Columbus, Ohio. Um, I could have died that night and should have, by all accounts, have died that night. But I preface that by saying, but yet here we are in 2021, and I'm yet and still alive.
Yeah,
I've
and
been a,
please.
I've been attending a event for my family on that July weekend.
Hey, Doc,
Yeah.
restate that your headpiece came out and it messed up the audio. Would you just please
Okay.
recover that? Take your time.
Alrighty. Can you hear me now?
Perfectly, thank you.
That July night, I had been in Peoria for a family gathering. We were dedicating one of my grandsons who was born just a few days before. And I drove out to Illinois, out to Peoria to attend his baby dedication. And I took with me a young man who was a foster child of mine. He had been in my home for about 30 days, and his name was Brian Rainier. We had traveled out there, and I'll spare you the story of how we rode together for the first time for a 6 hour drive. And anybody ever rode with a 15-year-old knows the number one thing they want to do is to drive. And all on the way out there, Brian kept asking, could he drive my car? And I kept saying, no, you can't drive. You don't have a license. And he said things like, you're going too slow and you drive like a little old lady. And I didn't say that, but Brian said that. I would not be caught saying those statements. But He was just trying to get a rise out of me. And he said, "Look, the Volkswagen went by and passed my Cadillac." He said, "Even the Volkswagens are passing you. You need to let me drive." And needless to say, I didn't let him drive on the way out. And we had a wonderful, wonderful time at the uh, baby dedication, and a wonderful meal after it at my daughter's house. And then we were getting in the car on our way home. And of course, Brian started up again, wanting to drive. And I'll tell you, never, never, ever have I ever been so grateful that I followed my mind and stayed within the confine of the law and did not let him drive. We were about an hour outside of Columbus, somewhere between Dayton and Springfield, Ohio, on Interstate 70. There were three boys on top of a bridge that overspanned the freeway. It was about 11:30 at night. I didn't see the bridge. I didn't see the boys. And a car had gone down the road ahead of me, I'm told. And this young boy dropped a rock. The rock fell off of the bridge and hit the back end of a car. And I'm told that the driver, you know, almost lost control of the car and was zigzagging down the street. And three boys on the bridge, two of them said to the one young man who dropped the rock, "Come on, let's get out of here because you're going to have the cops here and we're all going to be going to jail." And they said, "Come on, get out of here. You're going to kill somebody. And, and you don't want to do that." And the young man whose name was Jacob turned to the others and said, "You don't understand why I'm out here. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to kill somebody." They kind of shook their heads and kind of backed away from him. About a minute later, my car came down the road and I entered underneath of the overpass. I was getting ready to go under the overpass. And Jacob took an 8-pound rock and dropped it, fell 100 feet. My car was doing about 70 miles an hour. And that rock came through the windshield of my car, and the only thing it did was hit my face. Bam! It hit with such a force and the velocity of the car moving and the rock moving at the same time. It was as though a bomb had exploded in my face. Every bone in my face was smashed to sawdust. I lost my nose. I lost my eyes. They all came out of my head. Every bone was smashed from my forehead all the way down to the middle of my mouth and below my mouth. Seat flew back, and Brian, the young boy who had been riding with me, he did everything that a young boy needed to do to save my life. He reached over, grabbed the wheel, somehow kind of scooted me, and was able to reach the brake pedal, knock the car off of cruise control. He guided the car off the side of the road.
Jeez.
We were only a few minutes from a police barracks. He got out the car and he was just all nervous, didn't know what to do. Kept looking to see if I was alive, couldn't tell whether I was dead or alive. He picked up my cell phone and called 911. There's a recording of the 911 call. Got the cops to understand where the car was. It was in minutes. State troopers were there. Within a few minutes, there was an ambulance that arrived. He kind of scooped me up and took me straight to the hospital. The nearest hospital was in Springfield, Ohio, just a small town. And they stabilized me. And my sons got word from, they called my sons who were over in Columbus, and they were in Springfield in a matter of, seemed like minutes from what they say. My oldest son looked at me, just about collapsed while I was laying on the table.
Hmm.
Called his wife and said, "Daddy doesn't have a face." My face was literally gone. They air flighted me to Dayton, Ohio from Springfield, where I spent the remainder of my healing time. But as God would have it, that night I'm told it wasn't usual. It was really unusual. But there was a plastic surgeon by the name of Dr. Stephen Schmidt, who happened to be the grandson of a missionary, of a Seventh-day Adventist missionary. And his parents also worked in the Seventh-day Adventist church, who happened to be on duty that night, a plastic surgeon. They contacted him and he came to see me in the emergency room in the trauma center. And he began to work on me that night. When he found out I was a preacher or a pastor, he considered it an honor and a call from God. He would be on duty that night. And I'll tell you, from that July 10th until 3 or 4 years later, Dr. Stephen Schmidt never left my side. He did 40 surgeries to reconstruct my face from inside out. He had they'd already put a trach in my throat, but he did all kinds of surgeries to repair all the bones, to repair my nose. They even took bones out of my ribs and used it to make the bridge of my mouth. And a little joke, a little side joke. When I was in the hospital for that surgery, I kind of played with the nurses because after they had taken the bone out of my rib, when I came through, the nurse said, "Is there anybody in the waiting room you want me to get?" And I said, uh, "Yeah, you can get um, uh, get Mrs. Christian." And she said, "What would her name be?" I said, "Her name is Eve." And so she said, "Eve." So she went out to the waiting room and called for Eve Christian. She came back and she said, "Nobody answered from that name." I said, "That's ironic. She said she'd be bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." And the nurse said, "You're playing with me, aren't you?"
Man, so even in the midst of this, you had a beautiful personality still. Yeah, keep
Yeah.
going. Keep going. Let the listeners know what transpired after this. I mean, how
Oh,
did you get this name? Let's go.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
It was just that interesting. Um, I was in the hospital, and while I was there, we had a court hearing, and Jacob had been found. They did a house-to-house search, and while they were doing the house-to-house search, his parents turned him in, made him go to the police station and turn himself in. They went with him, and we ended up in court, and I came to court all wrapped up in bandages, and it was in really bad shape. And the judge asked if I had any comments, and I just simply told the judge that I wanted to forgive Jacob for what he had done. And the courtroom was like stunned. My family was in awe. And, and so he said, "Do you have any words?" And I said, "Well, I don't want you to misunderstand me. I'm not saying that I don't know what the court will do. What I want Jacob to know is that I honestly forgive him for what he did to me." Now, what I told the judge was, "You'll need to make the decision that's appropriate for the court." And so Jacob ended up with 15 years in prison for as an adult, and but he went knowing that I forgave him. During the time of my recovery, one of the things that I was able to do was take a course that the state of Ohio offered called Victim Offender Dialogue. And what that is, it allowed the victim and the offender to be able to converse via social workers and counselors. So I could send messages to Jacob, and he could send messages to me to encourage us during our healing process. Um, Part of that class allowed us the opportunity to visit, and that meant that I had an opportunity to go to the prison where Jacob was and to spend 6 hours in a day to meet with him. And I took advantage of that because I wanted him to know who I was and how what he did not only affected me, but the rippling effect of how it affected my my children and my grandchildren, how it affected my brothers and my sisters, how it affected my mother, who was that time in her 80s living here in Columbus. And I thought it was necessary that he would know that I really was a person and not just somebody driving down the highway, that he could take the rock and smash the window of the car.
Hmm.
It was one of the most inspiring days that I've ever had in my life. To meet the man who was trying to kill me, and yet be there to bestow unto him grace and mercy, uh, without hatred and without malice in my heart. I don't know if anybody can envision this or feel that, but um, what I did was what God had told me to do. When I was in the hospital, God had allowed me to lay there, and while I was dealing with this whole idea of pain and being hurt and being a victim, God spoke to me, and He kept using a scripture that we often say. He said, "Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." I said, "Yeah, God, I know that. I know the scripture. That's your prayer. I know that. I know that." And I'd lay down my head, and the scripture would come back again. Give us this day daily bread. So finally, I was in prayer, and I said, "Well, God, what do you want me to do?" And He said, "Well, I want you to do just what it says. I want you to forgive Jacob." And that's where this idea of forgiveness came from.
Hmm.
So as I laid it was in the courtroom. I was reiterating that. When I was in the prison visiting Jacob, all that was in my mind was I needed to do what God had commissioned me to do. That was to forgive him
Right.
unequivocally, not
Yeah.
wanting and unconditionally, not wanting anything back, nothing in return. In fact, I'm kind of human, and when God was dealing with me, told me to forgive Jacob, I tried bartering with God. I don't recommend this with anybody, okay? But God said, "I want you to forgive Jacob." I said, "Well, if you do that, will you give me back my sight?" No response from God. I said, "All right. So how about I forgive Jacob and you give me back one eye?"
Interesting.
No response from God. I said, "Okay. If I forgive him, could I at least see the light of day?"
Hmm.
No response. In fact, what God told me was, "You forgive him without bartering or getting anything from me. You'll do it because it's what I expect for my servants to do. That when somebody hurts them, they're to forgive them 7 times 7."
Wow.
That's how I got to. But while I
Yeah.
was in court, while I was in prison, Jacob and I had the opportunity to exchange. I wrote Jacob while he was in prison for several years after the incident, just wanting to encourage him, wanting him to be the best that he could be, making sure that he forgave himself, making sure that he was looking for his future. He finished high school while he was in prison. He did horticulture while he was in prison, and when he came out, he began to work for a nursery somewhere in the Dayton area. And I talked to him a little bit after he got out, and that was the last time that I really heard from Jacob. Uh, there were a couple of events that I was doing, and one of the chaplains that worked with him in prison also had been with me when I was working on my doctorate in Dayton. And
Hmm.
so I'm able to get messages from time to time from the chaplain as to how Jacob is doing.
So, so
So
can't help but just to be blown away and
yeah,
inspired. I mean, so you take an incident where you're driving down the road and you're coming from a blessing from a family member, newborn, christening, if you will, on your way home in Columbus, a kid drops a brick off a bridge intentionally. It crashes into your face, and it takes a turning point in your life. Now, not only there, you had humor in the hospital. You had um, such adversity that you faced, but you showed up to court where the verdicts are rendered, and you showed mercy. Um, such merciful love. And then not only that, you show up to prison to visit Jacob just to give him a better understanding. Look, this is the long-term effects, but I want you to know that I love you. And
Yeah, I think it's important that folks know that I don't want to minimize the amount of pain. I don't want to minimize the agony of laying in that bed. I can't minimize utter horror of finding out that um, I would never see again naturally. That
yeah,
we flew in specialists from Texas who, because there was a little piece of an eye left inside of my head, that there was a hope that maybe something could be done, but nothing could be done, and
hmm.
um, and that was in itself just something to have to adjust to. To see one moment and the next time you open your eyes to be blind. It's just beyond explainable.
Yeah,
But but in the midst of my healing, um, I believe that I healed faster than most people would heal. I believe that what I was going through, I experienced a faster recovery emotionally, and I contribute that all to the fact that I was able to forgive Jacob. Uh, Doctors and
unbelievable.
nurses were able to say to me, "We just can't believe how you're responding. We can't believe how your body is responding." And
Yeah,
that night when my sons got to the hospital, and that next morning when I was at the trauma center, uh, the doctors had told my children to consider what undertaker that they wanted to have my body taken to, because they didn't believe that I would make it through the next day.
right.
Um,
The odds were stacked against you as soon as that brick was dropped.
all the way
But,
along. They
but,
told them I might have been a vegetable even, and it was so close to my brain, that they thought when if I was alive, I wouldn't have any memory. Um, you know, but praise be to God, I have memory, and my attitude and the way I act is truly the way that I was before the accident. Maybe
yeah,
compounded a little bit more, but that was how I got the name Face of Forgiveness.
yeah.
It was,
Walk us through that. So
yeah.
what transpired? We know that you still tracked Jacob's life, and you guys became at even odds through mercy and forgiveness, which is you making a ripple effect from the divine, from Christ, right?
Yes, yes.
And you're
And,
a pastor, so just walk the people through maybe how you got the name the Face of Forgiveness and what
well,
transpired throughout your journey.
it's just been a journey. I have a friend who, his name is Jeff Phillips. And just as I met you, Justin, God sends people into our past. I firmly believe that we have contracts that are made in the spirit realm even before we get here, as to times and places that we're going to meet specific people that are going to spend or play a role in our lives. That's just my thought. Um, I believe that Jeff called me out of the clear blue, uh, and said that he was a writer and wanted to know if I had ever thought about writing a book. And I was still in the hospital and still had just come out of the rehab center. What I had started doing while I was in the hospital, a friend of mine brought me a little tape recorder, and not every day, but most days I would give a thought to what I experienced that day, what was going through my mind that day. And so I had collected all these notes in this tape recorder, didn't know what I was going to do with it. And so I have this guy who's a journalist, who's a writer, who says, "Well, I believe God has sent me to you to help you to produce this book so that others can benefit from your experience." And and while we were writing in the book, um, there was a line that said, um, we were looking for a line that talked about um, who I was, and how I got to this point, and how I wanted to be remembered. That's what it was. And how I wanted to be remembered. And to answer his question, the only thing I could say was, well, I'd just be the face of forgiveness. And and I have another good friend, uh, Dr. Stan Harris, Dr. Breakthrough, who's a martial artist and a missionary and a evangelist. And he and I done a lot of things together. And after we had met, he couldn't think of what to call me. And so he was doing a radio broadcast and he just said, well, here is Doctor Forgiveness. Then he said, no, here's the Forgiveness Doctor. And he said, Forgiveness Doctor, take it away. And so the name began to stick, and the attitude that it was all about my face, but not about my face, but the act of forgiveness. Um, can I just also point out, Wolf, that one of the things that God continues to help me to understand is that in our individual lives, we receive so much grace and so much mercy from God that when we catch hold of His grace and mercy, that it ought to be a natural for us to extend the same to other individuals. I just pray that I'm making sense tonight to somebody.
You're definitely
And,
making sense to
you
me.
know, you know, when you think the Word of God says that
Yeah.
His grace is new every morning, that His mercies are new every morning. And I believe that in our lives, uh, we ought to be dropping droplets of grace and
Yeah.
mercy on the people that we come in contact with. And in my case, it just happened to be grace of forgiveness. Uh, but when I think about all that He's forgiven me for in my life, how
Yeah.
could I not forgive somebody else, no matter how bad it may look on the outside, no matter how dastardly the deed might have sounded or looked? But I just believe that God should get the glory out of it. So it's not for me, but it's for God to get the glory. Let me also point out that
Sure.
as the trial went on and as we learned more about Jacob and more about his friends and what they were going through, Jacob was a very troubled young man at the age of 15. He came from kind of a disparaging home situation, and but in the midst, he was struggling to find God, trying to come to an understanding of who God was. Now, this was
Right.
before he threw the rock, and part of that journey took him into the dark world, and he began to try to understand what it meant to be a devil worshiper. He had a pentagram on his floor. He had the black lights on the walls to light up the pentagram. And when I talked with him, we talked briefly about that. And he said, well, you're calling me a devil worshiper. And he said, but I never considered myself to be a devil worshiper. He said, I just thought of myself as a wannabe devil. And I
Hmm.
freaked that out because what I told him was, you hit my eye with a perfect bullseye. I believe that Satan was trying to take me out, and you were the vessel that he used. And
Yeah.
and so I believe that the whole act of the rock throwing was a demonic effort on the part of Satan because I was at the age of 50, uh, was a manager for the state of Ohio for the Department of Natural Resources. I ran a job training program for kids. I was a pastor. I had raised my own kids. My two youngest were just graduating from high school or about to graduate. The youngest was, and the next to the youngest was in college in Mississippi at the time. No, she just left Mississippi and gone to Colorado at the time when the rock hit me. Um, but I had all these things going on, and I felt like I was on my way up in my ministry. I was just leaving my secular job to go full time into ministry. In fact, I resigned in June, and this was July the 10th when I
Yeah.
got hit. So I thought, man, I'm on my way to do what I believe God wanted me to do. And
You just
bam,
had
I
no
was
clue
just
what was
knocked
coming.
down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But as you pointed out in your opening, um, this experience has done far, far more uh, for my life and for the ministry than I believe I could have ever done.
Yeah. I mean, it's like adversity seems to be an advantage, and not only for that, especially when you have such faith, it's relentless, unshakable. And it seems that when you follow your faith into the mission for people and for humanity, for God, as you put it, the type of barriers that we break through, and sometimes we're being broken in the worst ways in these positions. How? Let me
But,
ask.
but, but,
How did you remain optimistic against all these odds? I think people would be interested to hear that. How did
well,
you come out clear-minded? And
for as I said, I have been preaching from 1970 to 2000. I started preaching when I was about 18, and in upstate New York, and um, was a man of faith, and just believed in the Holy Spirit and being filled with the Spirit. And um, by the time that rock hit me, if I do the calculations, 70, 80, 90, 2000, it was almost 40 years. Um, I claimed to preach the gospel. And I thought, how ironic would it be for me to, to not continue to serve God because I had children that I had been training all their lives, talking about how wonderful God was. And
well,
even at that time when I got hit, my youngest son was at Bible college right here in Ohio University, Bible college right down here outside of Columbus. And, and everybody was already saved and had been baptized. And so there was a witness there that I really didn't feel I had a choice to do anything other than live what I had preached. You know,
wow.
um, you don't stop because you got hurt. That's the time to follow through on what you've already said that you believe.
So
And so,
it was like a test of your faith. This was your opportunity to really put your faith into action. This adversity you
exactly,
faced.
exactly,
So that's how it's the
exactly.
advantage. It's like adversity is almost a sign from God, if you will, that it's a
Either make
promotion
you
in
or
life if you can overcome it.
yeah, it either make you or break you.
Yeah,
Either you're going to live what you said and have done, and do what you proclaim was the will of God, the perfect will of God.
right.
And I can preach about grace and I can preach about forgiveness. But after the rock, I had an opportunity to live forgiveness and to exhort His grace and exhort mercy to someone else. You know,
Man.
so it was. I would hate for my kids to go to hell um, because they were unable to forgive. Because remember, this was their dad who they thought was bigger than life. I'd been a single parent most of their life, raising most of them in my home
Yeah.
by myself. And my kids would say to me, during the recovery, they said, "Daddy, you've always been bigger than life. You know, no matter what it was, you made it happen. You figured out how to make things happen."
Yeah.
And to me, it was just the struggles of life, but to them, it was some supersonic, you know, man of God who just made it all work. But it really wasn't. It was, just the struggles that you go through.
Yeah. And
Living paycheck to paycheck,
it's
and
at that time you're just like, Lord, I need you to show up right now.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
And that's what it was. I mean, that's how it always was. And whenever I needed him to show up, he showed up.
Yeah.
And so while I was in the bed, one of the things that I thought clearly in my mind was, When has God, when has Jesus never been enough? When has he
Yeah.
never been enough? When has he absolutely let you down?
I think
How
that's
about
where he thrives. I mean, and the
Mhm.
nothingness. It's, you know, everybody's looking for qualifications and standard these days, but God doesn't call the qualified. It seems that in all reality,
Well,
he
he
qualifies
qualifies
the
the unqualified.
he qualifies the called.
Yeah, yeah. He qualifies those that aren't even qualified to be qualified. But he says, "Bam, here's my
Boom.
stamp of approval. Go do." You know. And when you look at what he did with the fishermen, he just said, "This is what I want you to do. This is how you do it, and now you go and make more men just like you." You know.
Hmm.
And I believe that that's what God has called us to do. And so part of my mission, Wolf, is to make other believers of forgiveness to show the world how the world ought to be,
Yeah.
because that's what he has called us to do.
And when
There,
it
there was
comes, yeah, please go. Yeah.
there was one more aspect, uh, the thought of me ever being considered a missionary or going anywhere to deliver the gospel had never been a thought in my brain. And one day when I was in the office with Dr. Schmidt, he was so excited. He came bubbling into the office and said, "You'll never guess what I'm doing." And I've got an opportunity to go to Guatemala to do a mission project. I didn't even know what a mission project was. He said, "Well, that's wonderful." He said, "Well, why don't you come and go with us?" And at this time, I had literally um, a boob, you know how ladies have the best augmentations of their breast. They put
Hmm.
these plastic wounds in their breast
Sure.
to make it. I had one of those in the top of my head that they were using to stretch my scalp so they'd have skin to pull down over my forehead.
My
And,
goodness.
and so my head is like open, and they have to use a needle once a week to put more saline in it to stretch it even more. And I'm like, you want me to go where? I've got a trach in my throat. I can't see, and I've got this boob in the top of my head.
This
And
boob.
and he says, well, when you're going with a bunch of doctors and nurses, who could be any safer? I was like,
Man.
see
So
this
even
about
in
his
that,
husband.
even looking back at that, you still find a way to have humor. It's just
Here,
unbelievable.
he, here I go, trekking across not the country, but we left here and went to Guatemala, and I told my story via a translator, and and it was the most marvelous experience that I've ever had. Uh,
That's
that,
fantastic.
not knowing even what missionaries do, but I was a missionary, and not only that, I came back, and just the Sunday that I was leaving to go to Guatemala, um, one of my members of the church was named Zika, and Zika was from a small village in northeast Africa, in the country of um, of Eritrea, and the small town was called Sanafe. And on my way out of the church that morning, uh, Zika had a chance to do the story for the Sunday school, and he began to cry as he told the children in our church about the children in his village and how they didn't have enough water to drink. That
Huh.
even when they took their baths, they had to save that water, try to filter it. That was the water that they drank that day. And
And
that crushed my. And I remember on my way out of the church going to Guatemala, Zika was holding my hand, and the church had prayed for me. And I said, Zika, this trip is Guatemala. And when I return, the next trip is Africa. And so when I came back from Guatemala, I began to collect food and water. We produced 2 truckloads of water and food to send to this village in in Africa. But we weren't going to just send it. I had four people that were going to go with three people that went with me. One was my friend Jeff, who helped me write Face of Forgiveness, and then my best friend who graduated with me with my doctoral degree, Dr. Sheldon Williams. He passed through
Yeah.
Philip City Baptist Church in the Bronx, and a brother friend who just passed last year, Ray Moss, who was a member, never really a member of my church, but always was at my church. Ray went with me to Guatemala, and then he went with me to Africa. And
Mm.
what a wonderful, wonderful experience that was for the two of us. Um, and now
So this
since
has
then,
become,
I've done
yeah,
eight,
please.
eight mission projects in Africa, in South Africa, uh, Guatemala, Honduras, Central South America, Canada, the Caribbean, um, been through England and Switzerland. The only place I haven't gone has been to Asia and Australia.
Well, the next time you go somewhere, I'm coming with you as your eyes. Fair enough.
Yes, sir. You definitely can pack it up and be ready to roll.
Yeah, we
Um,
have a blast. But let me ask, because losing your sight has given you new sight and to perspective and everything. Let me, would you say that faith is true sight?
I don't know if I could say that it's. I wouldn't contradict that it's true sight, but I think my blindness has caused me to have to depend on God.
Yeah,
Um,
which
I
is
think
pure
it's
faith.
Creflo Dollar that says we walk by faith and not by sight, and there's so much truth to that because you are always delving in the unknown, even if it's a common experience. I may go up and down my stairs every day, but every time I go up and down my stairs, it's truly a new, unknown experience.
Hmm.
Um, you know, so it's having those kind of that kind of experience, but it's really having the faith in your journey that God is going with you wherever you go.
Right.
Um,
And he's not the
so
spare tire, he's the steering wheel then,
he,
right?
he he is. He's the pilot. He's in control. People will say to me, I've got to be in New York to preach. This was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I was going. Somebody said, "Well, who's going with you?" And I'll say, well, uh, Jesus, you know, and not meaning it flippant, but he's really all I need. And so, I'd get on a plane and I'd fly to New York and take the subway or take the train and go out to Long Island by myself or tromp around the city and get from one spot to another. And people are like, "How do you do that in New York City? Aren't you afraid?" Well, no, not really. You'd be surprised. God puts His angels everywhere you need them.
No
And
doubt.
New York, which is supposed to be such a cold and heartless city, but I'll tell you, people get out of their way to help somebody uh, get from one spot to another in New York. You know. So it's all about it's a faith journey.
Yeah.
It becomes a real faith journey. That's the only way I can explain it. We're exploring the unknown, and we just have to trust Him all the way through it.
Well, I think you answered it. Faith perhaps is true sight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. Our city, just let me take this a different direction and shift gears with you, Doc. I love you. And look, just I know that sharing some of this, I hope that you understand there are people, this will be echoed forever. And it's an honor. But just a recap for people that are just watching or, um, this is Dr. Johannes J. Christian, a gentleman that had an unfortunate situation take place where a brick was dropped off him on his face from a freeway. He found a way to forgive and have humor, and it strengthened his faith. Even though he lost his sight, he gained true sight through faith. and mercy and grace. It's just beyond touching. He's written numerous books, and perhaps we should get into that now. Um,
Well, it got me so that I can't even talk. Um,
yeah,
a couple of things that I think I want to make sure
please.
that people understand. Um, God prepares us for our journey, and even in the midst of our journey, He helps us to know that He's always there. If this thing has taught me anything, it's how truly to lean and depend on Him,
Yeah,
and that the scripture that says we can ask anything in His name. Somebody said, "Well, you can ask, but He didn't give you back your sight." But He didn't promise that He'd give everybody their sight. He didn't promise that He'd do a miraculous miracle for everybody. But I believe that He disposed those miracles as He sees.
right.
And who am I to be angry with Him because He elected not to give me back my sight? He's given me what I've needed to actually survive. And and in many ways, I've done more blind than I believe that I would ever have been able to do had I been sighted for the last 20 years. So there's a gratefulness there because of the way He has dispelled that grace, even without the kind of miracle I was looking for. He's given me so many more miracles,
Uh,
meet so many different kinds of people, and be placed in such unbelievable situations. Um, but I want to let people know that um, it didn't just stop with the rock. That I've been doing little walks that I've called um, place of forgiveness walks uh, to help to raise the money for us to be able to speak in schools and to give away books. And I've had a wonderful relationship with uh, Dave, the Dave Thomas Foundation, Wendy's, that has helped to sponsor some of my walks and give book giveaways for the last 10 years. Every Christmas I might give away, 300, 400 books just to people because they paid for them and help me to be able to give them to people who are in foster care or adoptions or in residential facilities. But
so you've been a foster parent as well.
oh yes, yeah, I was for 42 years as a foster parent. That's a whole other book of itself. But let me say this, that you know those walks have, they used to be when we first started, maybe a couple blocks around the city, or walking from the State House over to Wolf Park, or then it grew to walking from Columbus to Cleveland, or walking from Cincinnati to Columbus. And but there was always with the purpose of helping to understand that there were people out there that were being bullied, and I considered my perpetrator to really be a bully.
Hmm.
And so we've been raising funds for the Forgiveness Foundation, and God has laid it on my heart back in September of 2020. I took part in a Heal the Land um, uh,
Seminar,
World
convention.
Convention in Cleveland, and I believe it was just an amber of what God is trying to build. I believe that amber is going to manifest into a true fire. Um, but the idea of the Heal the Land was all about forgiveness and all about the scriptures, Second Chronicles 7:14. If my people
Yeah.
who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then would I heal from heaven and I would heal their land. Um, that amber has been burning in me, if you will, Wolf, since September, and so I've been envisioning uh, what it would look like to unite the United States through forgiveness and reconciliation is a part of
Hmm.
the land being healed and united.
And we might as
As
well
I
just
look at
unveil a little bit about that.
right. That's where I was going. Because when I look at that, I get excited because I just see such opportunity for the people of God to be such a part of that. And so I have set the weekend before Thanksgiving
Right.
in November of 21 to be um, what I'm calling Unite Our Country through Forgiveness and Reconciliation.
Yeah. The
And
forgiveness walk.
I want that to be an opportunity for us to use social media to help people to understand not only my story, but other stories of how people have grown spiritually and physically because of the acts of forgiveness. I
Yeah.
want us to
That's
look at
that's awesome.
I want us to look at the attitudes of white supremacists and and people who think that the country belongs to just one small segment and and come to the understanding of how do we understand one another and where does forgiveness and reconciliation play out in those kinds of situations. What is
Hmm.
uh what is systemic racism and 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 where do we go with that? So what once you get an answer, then so what do you do with that?
Yeah.
I believe that it's about forgiveness. I believe that it's about being able to reconcile it and understand what another person is thinking and feeling, uh, and somehow you meet in the middle, and there has to be a meeting of the minds. But
Right.
I believe that it's through those acts of forgiveness and the idea of reconciliation that we can unite our country. When I think about what happened a month ago in our capital in Washington, it saddens me uh, because I heard such vile, bitter anger. Uh, Yet I believe that our founding fathers saw
Yeah.
grace and mercy as the root of putting our country together. And so my
Grace and
desire,
mercy is at the root of the foundation of our country and the glue that keeps it together.
exactly. And
Hmm.
so, so I want people to hear more about our campaign, but I believe that this effort of sharing forgiveness and reconciliation is going to be so powerful. And with the help of unlimited, um, give me the name of your company,
Limitless.
Limitless. Uh, Limitless Media that that I believe we're going to shake the foundation of our country. I'm looking for some very strong leaders. I'm praying that God is going to allow Manning um, Fields from the Cleveland Browns and from and what's his name LeBron James and even this young lady who's becoming so precious. Michelle,
Yeah.
I believe her last name is Gordon, who is the poet. She was spoke last night on the on the oh this is the game they just played football game last night
Super Bowl.
the Super Bowl. Amen. Uh, but God is raising up some mighty people that I believe are going to be taking a part of this, and I know that you'll have a great part in it as we begin to figure out how to do this all through social media. But I
Yeah.
believe that it's going to be an awesome experience. So
Yeah.
you
So I
stay
look.
tuned.
Yeah, I'm excited about. So just for people tuning in, this is just a little bit of a sneak peek on, um, you know, Doc's mission and Limitless joining forces. We have many things that we're going to be addressing, and it's with the essence of forgiveness, social reconciliation, and healing for our land and for our people. I mean, the time for change is now, because if tomorrow doesn't arrive, now is all that we have. And Doc, you had mentioned some of the things that we got coming, so I'll just recap it if you want, boss.
Oh, please,
In,
please, you
in
got it.
October, we're going to be October, right? Is the
Yes,
March?
yes, yes.
There's going to be a march, and we intend to take this march from Columbus, Ohio, all the way to Washington D.C. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
And that march will
Eh,
be utilized to help the convention that we want to have, a conference, just to bring awareness and expert ways to look at our societal structure. And we are both firm believers that the way to stop the violence is to show forgiveness.
Amen. Well, the forgiveness and agape love, because that's
Unconditional love.
exactly, exactly. And when you reconcile, it means that you come to an understanding and you come to an agreement.
Right.
So when you talk about reconciliation, it's helping me to understand the hurt that somebody else is feeling because of feeling left out, because of feeling isolated, or
Yeah.
because they think that one group got more than the other group got and it left them out. But once we begin to reconcile those differences, that's got to bring harmony into our country. In the African American community, we picked up a cloth that we use a lot in our dress, and it's called kente cloth. And what kente cloth is, it's a woven cloth, and each of the woven strands represented different tribes and different family units. Uh, but what that kente cloth does is it takes those single strands and it weaves them together so that it begins to form a strong piece of fabric that can't be torn, that can't be ripped, that will last and sustain.
Hmm.
And I believe that part of what we're going to see is that weaving of the fabrics of our country, uh, weaving of our differences, that's going to make us strong.
Yeah. Well, I think that people are begging for solutions, and societal structures are struggling around the world. Violence, uprise, people are living in fear. But
Mm-hmm.
perhaps wherever fear is present, faith is required, and that seems to be how you continue to inspire people just through that thought. I mean, it's adversity is not a dead end; it's a sign of a promotion in life if you're willing to face it in faith. I just
Well, yeah,
really encourage.
you don't really get you don't really get to that understanding somehow until after you've gone through the experience.
Right,
If I could use just one more example, and I'm so grateful for the time and
man.
to be able to talk about the mission that I feel. But you know, about 8 years ago, um, when I first met Dr. Stan Harris, uh, I said he was a martial artist earlier in this um, event tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, when I first met him and he found out I was blind, he asked me to come up on the stage because he was busting boards. You know how they put the board on top of two stacks of bricks and
Oh
they have
yeah.
the person come and I'm probably the most unlikely person, even with sight, to be picked to break a board. Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
with 125 pounds soaking wet and look like the epitome of anybody that never worked out. And anyway, Dan had me come to the stage and he said, I'm gonna have you break this board. And I'm like, yeah, right, okay, we're gonna break it. And so he said, first you gotta change your mindset because you gotta believe you're gonna break the
Right.
board. And so I had to believe that I was gonna break the board. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna break this board. Dan said, no, you can't just see yourself with your hand coming to the board, but you have to see yourself with your hand through the board. And so you can't just look at life and look at what you're experiencing, but you've got to look past what you've experienced. Because if you
Right.
just look at the experience, you never get through it. So,
Mm,
so when God gives you this, I'm not just looking at a conference of reconciliation. I'm looking at the outcome of the conference of reconciliation. I'm looking at the harmony and the peace that is going to come as a result of the virtual conference that we're putting
right.
together. I'm not just stopping at, oh, this would be a nice thing to do, but I've got to see
Yeah.
us with it already done and what it needs to look like on the other side of
Right.
through. So I hope
Man,
I'm
that's
getting that across, but um, you know,
beautiful.
he was so adamant about you just can't stop with your hand on the board. You've got to see yourself already through the board before
Yeah.
you even touch the board.
Yeah.
And so we've got to believe that this is an act of God. We got to believe this is an event of God. And I've got to believe that it's an event that's going to change the attitude of our country.
Well, I believe we're going to see ripple effects of beautiful things to come. And I'm just humbled by the experience and what we already have planned. So we'll continue to bring that to the people. I usually
Amen.
ask some of these people, sometimes when I interview people, I just want to know, this is kind of your opportunity. What do you think? And all that we're facing, I understand forgiveness, but in everything, take consideration that the world's going through. What's your word of encouragement? I mean, what's your limitless message to the world, Doc?
I think the, oh gosh, thank you for asking that question. I think it's a great question. Um, I think that we have to look at the experiences that we're given, the opportunities that we're given, and no matter how negative they may seem, we need to try to find the the good in it. In it, um, I, I would encourage people tonight who are hurting. I would encourage people tonight who are feeling despondent and who are feeling lonely. This pandemic has been something for all of us to try to wrap our heads around. Um, but I'm looking tonight to to see how we can help people to feel um, whole in the midst of uh, a world that appears to be falling apart. Um, you know that we understand the awesomeness of the God that we serve, that that he's there, and we used to sing a song when I was coming up, and it was Jesus be a fence all around me every day. uh, Jesus, I want you to protect me as I travel on my way. I know you can, I know you will fight my battles if I just keep still. And ultimately what we want is that Jesus, that God, that Abba Father, that uh, awesome eternal Spirit uh, to engulf us and protect us in the midst of troubling water. That makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And man, I think that if anything's limitless, it's forgiveness. And
Yeah,
perhaps our pain will only last as long as our unforgiveness.
yeah. You're so right. You're so right. You are so right. Uh,
Man,
so,
forgive and
so it
live,
would
huh?
behoove you, yeah, it would behoove you to let it go and learn how to forgive, so that you can be whole. And I think with that, that's probably where we need to wrap this thing up tonight. Uh,
Fantastic. Well, we'll
we,
make sure to come on and do more. But
well, all you gotta do is invite me back.
boom,
No,
boss, you got it. Well, you got a brother
yeah,
for life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Just
how
to
can
let
people
you
get a
know.
hold of you? How can they donate to
Uh,
your, because you have a 501c3, Face of Forgiveness, right?
yes, we are a
So you
Faith
got
of
a
Forgiveness
foundation.
Foundation.
Tell
Yes,
them how to
yes,
do
sir.
it, boss.
You can go to our website, faithofforgiveness.com. On that website, you can purchase one of our books. He's in the house, the power that's in you, the face of forgiveness, which is our, I guess, our major sell. Um, you purchase those right on site. You can make a donation. There's a donation button there. You can find out more about uh, the face of forgiveness right there on that website. I would warn you, there are some pictures here that does say watch out because they're kind of graphic, but they're pictures from the healing process that I went through. Um, but if you go to faceofforgiveness.com, that's how you can reach me. That's how you can get in touch with us. You can also email me at a very simple email. It's dr as in doctor jjc at att.net. That's
Boom.
dr all lowercase jjc at att.net. Um, and those are the major ways of reaching me. You reach out, I'll be happy to respond to you. And again,
Awesome.
I just want to thank you for allowing me so much time to do this broadcast tonight.
The
Um,
pleasure and the honor is shared. Truly. So
I'm looking
anybody
to,
tuning in, check out my brother here. What were you saying, Doc?
well, I'm just excited about coming back. It's been my pleasure. This is Reverend Dr. Johannes J. Christian, better known as the Face of Forgiveness, or better known as Forgiveness Doctor. Uh, what can I say? It's been just awesome to be here tonight. Thank you
Man.
again, Wolf,
Yep.
and
Hey, thank you,
Godspeed to
Doc.
you.
Thank you. So anybody listening, you can check out his books. Incredible stories of adversity, overcoming adversity. Check out my brother's. He's truly a brother to me. Dr. Christian, I just want to thank you for inspiring the masses. But check out his mission, his life, and how. And I assure you, if you haven't been inspired by this, there's more to come when it comes to his journey and the ripple effects of forgiveness, relentless grace, and mercy shown. So, if we learn anything, it's we live when we forgive. So,
And
there's no limit to forgiveness, and together, our potential is limitless. So, check out my brother here, Doc, and tune in for other things to come because we've got a lot of beautiful things taking place in Columbus. We'll be launching initiatives together. But if you're from the Wolf Pack, you know how it goes. Do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly. If someone tells you that 1 + 1, Doc, I want to just share some ancient info here. If someone tells you that 1 + 1 is 3, well, they're probably a liar. But if someone tells you 1 + 1, Doc, is 1, perhaps they're a thief. Would you agree?
oh yeah,
But if someone tells you 1 + 1 equals peace, you can trust them. Doc, I want to thank you for everything, man. You're not one thing, you're all things in one. Cheers, boss. Till next time, all right?
all right. Thank you, Wolf.
Cheers.